Today I will be painting a white dog in watercolor. I am starting off with a very light outline and am filling my entire paper, my watercolor paper, with clean water. And then I'm focusing on using just the primary colors, so red, yellow, and blue. And my red is actually a pink, an opera rose. And I am just looking on the white dog for where I have kind of an under color of these three colors. So where is it a little bit more yellowish in tones? Where is it more pinkish? Where is it more blue? And because my paper is wet, I am trying to focus on just using those colors in those areas, and it should give me a very soft transition in the colors. So that really helps. I'm also doing that in the background. So my background is going to be mostly greens and blues, and so I'm trying to kind of indicate that too. And you'll see because my paper is wet, this is a wet on wet technique, I'm getting these nice soft edges that it makes it look like it's almost glowing. And that's kind of what I want. I want a very soft, subtle edges right now in this stage, this first layer on my watercolor paper. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill all around my dog with these colors, kind of mixing with the greens and the blues. And then we'll go in and add another layer after it's dry. I'm also using a little Kleenex or paper towel to kind of lift out the brightest whites. So I can kind of go back in while it's still wet and lift out some of the light colors. All right, now that it's dry, I'm going to start refining some of the details. So I'm going to go in and add the nose and eyes, mouth, collar, things like that, so that I can kind of figure out where some of the important parts of the dog's features are. So I'm just going in. I don't usually like to use black, so for this step, I've mixed a dark using blue and brown, and I'm just trying to kind of fill in some of those important details on the dog. Usually the blue I use is like an ultramarine blue, and the brown is usually a burnt umber. I like mixing these two to create a dark because you can control the warmth. So if you want it to be a warmer dark, you use a little more brown. If you want it to be a cooler dark, you use a little bit more blue. So I'm just kind of going through, and I've got a smaller brush now. This is a small round brush, and I'm just almost using it like a pencil, just kind of drawing in some of those darker areas on the dog to try to define some of those features so that I have kind of some of my darker values established. And then that way I can kind of build up to those in other parts of my painting. So I like to do some light lights and then some darker darks and then kind of fill in all the mediums. So I'm also paying attention, like especially down here under the nose, of the direction that the fur is growing. So just paying attention to that and kind of putting that in different places, and then looking for other places, usually between the head and the ears. There's a dark kind of shadow in a dog and under the chin. So I'm looking for some of those darks to establish kind of those areas and those shadows with this darker color. I wanted to get a little lighter, so I'm going in a little bit more of a blue direction here. Again, white dogs are never like fully white, so you have to kind of look for the other colors and maybe even exaggerate them a little bit too. So I'm adding a little bit of a bluish color here to add some of the shadow parts of the dog. And again, really trying to keep that fur texture in mind. So just kind of painting in a fur-like way to try to get those furry textures. And it looks maybe a little dark right now. You're thinking, oh man, that can't be a white dog. But once I do the dark background right next to it, that's another trick to help with a white dog, is making the background super dark so that the dog doesn't look as dark. I'm filling in the details of the collar right now with some ultramarine blue mixed with a little bit of cerulean blue, and just kind of looking for those areas, those spots that would be blue part of the collar versus like a black part of the collar. And just trying to get some of these detail elements in. Also filling in the tag, and I will be writing the dog's name. This dog's name is Teddy, with a white gel pen so that I don't have to try to paint around the letters. If you are wanting to paint around the letters, you could totally do that, but I love using white gel pens for some of the smaller white details like that. All right, I'm going to continue working on the face here. I'm looking for other areas where the fur is, different colors. This time I've made it a little bit warmer in color, so adding a little bit of pink and yellow, and I'm kind of filling out some of the parts of the ears. The ears kind of had this pinkish tint to them, so I'm adding a little bit more of the warmth to those as opposed to the chest of the dog, which is cooler. So you can kind of see the difference there. And I'm just going to go ahead and fill the ears with those fur-like texture just by using a lot of little brush strokes. Kind of dab at the ears, get that all filled in. And bring some onto the face. So just really, again, trying to study the white dog. Where do I see color? What shade or what tone, or what types of colors can I find in the white fur? Maybe it's reflecting off of something. Maybe it just has a little bit of a shadow somewhere. So you just have to really kind of pay attention to some of those specific details in the dog's fur. I'm going to go around the nose and the mouth a little bit more, soften some of that, and just kind of build up those values. At this point, I am ready to darken up the background a bit. Again, this will help my white dog look a lot brighter. So if I kind of come in and increase the values behind the dog, that really helps. So I'm switching back to a larger brush, and this time I did not wet my background, but I am trying to kind of add in colors while it's wet. So I'm being real careful right next to my dog. I'm trying to give that fur-like texture in the outline of the dog. And then I'm just kind of filling in around the dog with these greens and blues and hints of yellow. So as I add colors, I'll throw some color on there. I'm adjusting the edges, and then while the color is still wet, I throw in some other colors too, just to kind of have a soft blend behind the dog. So I just want it to be kind of very, yeah, soft and a little bit darker so that the dog stands out from this background. So I'm just going to kind of work my way around the dog and fill in those colors. I'm using some cerulean blue mostly. I'm using a little bit of green and a little bit of yellow, a little bit of phthalo blue as well if I want to get really dark in places. Most of them are very watery. I even used a little bit of white to kind of make them a little creamier. A little bit of yellow, and the yellow I'm using is yellow ochre mostly. I'm just trying to kind of soften these areas and work my way all the way around Teddy here so that he stands out from the background and doesn't get lost. Now I'm going to go back into the dog and add even some more dark values. So now that the background is darker, it can kind of give me an idea of places in the dog that could be darker too. It's just all about finding a good balance. And so I kind of go back and forth and look for places that could use just a little bit more definition, a little bit more variety, even finger painting a little bit in here, adding a little bit of color and then kind of softening it a little bit with my fingers. And just looking for places where it's not like bright white. So I want to kind of save the bright whites for like the highlights, the lighter areas of the dog. So if it's not bright white, it needs something. So I'm just kind of going through and defining some of those areas even more, adding a little bit more detail. I'm using a slightly larger round brush so that I can get bigger areas too. And then I'm just trying to really define some of those areas with my watercolor. And there you have my watercolor dog, Teddy.